Hi everyone, pleasure to be here. I'm just getting my slides up. So I'm going to talk to you today about engineering inclusive cultures, masculinity, mental health, and a new model of safety in STEM. Bit of background on me. I'm a chartered chemical engineer by background, specialised in health and safety, and I helped set up the UK's largest LGBTQ plus network called Engineering. That's how I earned my rainbow stripes for diversity in engineering, as I call it. And I then went on to set up my business, EqualEngineers, which helps connect diverse talent with inclusive employers in engineering and technology. We've worked with an array of clients from mechanical engineering, the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, through to Vodafone, EDF. So really sitting at the middle of engineering institutions, universities, and industry as well. I'm also a visiting professor at UCL in inclusive engineering leadership. And I'm going to talk to you today about my interests in physical safety and how we can use that as a model for psychological safety and getting more people to engage with our efforts on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace by considering the importance of diversity of thought. I won an award last year for my work in promoting engineering to the public. So I am a recognized leader in this space. We do know what we're doing at EqualEngineers, and we're having impact in everything we're trying to do. I always like starting off with a safety message in my talk. So mental health is incredibly important. It's just as important to our well-being as our physical health. And that's something that working in STEM is very, very important to remember. So just a reminder to yourself to check in and also check in with others around their mental health and well-being. Know what your stressors are and know what your healthy coping mechanisms are to help release those moments. So a bit about mental health and masculinity. I should give a warning here. There is some talk in the reference in here to suicide awareness, and some of today's my talk will relate to that. So if for any reason you need to, turn off or whatever, then that is not a problem. So how safe are you? I was sitting in a coffee shop once in London, minding my own business, working on my laptop, and then this person, this tall guy in his 40s, stood up and started making some strange sounds. And I was like, oh, what is wrong with him? But then he stood up, he stuttered a bit, and then he fell to the ground and smacked his head on the floor as he landed. Immediately, I leapt up and responded. I checked his breathing and he was breathing, so I put him in the recovery position. But blood started pooling everywhere on the floor. The emergency services were contacted and the team in the coffee shop came to help, and the gentleman was taken on his way. So how was I able to respond so quickly in that physical safety emergency? Well, I'm actually a trained lifesaver. I used to compete in lifesaving competitively as a sport when I was younger. I actually won an award, a British medal, in 2003 for the work that I do. So I was able to respond because I'd role modeled and learned the drill of responding to incidents. It's what we do as lifesavers. We emulate and do scenarios where we respond to situations of physical danger and risk. But what if someone's psychological safety was at risk? What if someone's mental health was in jeopardy? Would I know what to do? Would you know what to do? I dare say in most instances, maybe not. In engineering, physical safety underpins everything that we do. It's something that engineers and STEM professionals are very, very focused on. But we don't often talk about mental health and well-being and consider it at the same equivalency as we consider physical safety. And I'm interested in the models that the evolution of physical safety provide for us to then develop this further. So if we look at the Bradley curve, which was developed by DuPont back in the 1970s, you see lost time injury rate as a function of safety culture. Essentially, what this shows is that over time, we used to respond to safety incidents based on our reactive behaviors. Eventually, we started bringing in legislation, so it was very compliance driven. So we developed more dependent cultures. And essentially, we then started seeing the benefits of being proactive in this. So if we're looking out for our own safety, we take it upon us to take safety seriously. And now we're in a stage where we know that it's good for teams. So we're trying to create these interdependent cultures where safety is at the heart of it. And think about the investment that's taken over time to really get to that culture. We still have a plateau, however, of injury rates. And so the question is, what are we doing for the next stage to really help get to zero, which is the ultimate ambition? And I think the answer to this rests in psychological safety and where this intersects with diversity. So I was at a client once. A client shared with me they were in a workplace, and a group of construction workers started having banter, and the banter related to something that related to the individual of the person in the room, and they were unaware of it. And it took for the individual to stand up and challenge this majority group that were using language that verged on bullying and harassment almost. And that took courage for the individual to stand up and call it out. But does that happen at every moment in time when it ought to happen? And actually, should it even be needing to happen? Should we really have a culture where that type of behavior is tolerated? So we talk about privilege a lot in diversity and inclusion, and privilege by definition is a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular group or person. And psychological safety is being able to show and employ oneself without fear of negative consequences of self image, status, or career. So, if you are in a minority group in a workplace context, you are outnumbered. So, you have to do you necessarily feel psychologically safe to stand up and call out non inclusive behaviors for fear of retribution or unsafe acts for fear of retribution? It's not always the case. So, privilege to some extent is being able to be psychological safety. And that then leads to inclusion as well. How many times do you hear about bring your whole self to work? Come as who you are into the workplace. There's a bit of a separation with what these phrases mean. So, you actually need to feel psychologically safe in order to speak out and help build trust. Now, I feel that with diversity, equity, and belonging and inclusion, we've focused so much on minoritized groups to the extent that we have neglected the need to engage majority groups. White, cisgendered, heterosexual, able bodied, neurotypical men that represent the majority of the STEM industries. Um, and so a few years ago, I was sat on I discovered, the Office of National Statistics data sets on the suicide rates in the construction, manufacturing, and process industries, the industries within which I am a practitioner, a process safety engineer. Statistically, you were more likely to die through suicide in some of these industries than a typical hazard like a dropped object falling from height, electrocution. Things that, as a safety engineer, I used to spend effort, time, and money helping eradicate, minimize. So it dawned on me that if the intention of our inclusion and belonging programs are to create a place where you can be your whole self, bring your whole self to work, clearly it's not working for this male majority group. Otherwise, we would be able to have cultures where people feel like they can belong and be open about whatever the root causes are that's leading to this suicidal ideation. But I didn't actually believe the survey, the data. So in 2019, we commissioned our own research on masculinity in engineering, and we ran this survey twice, once pre-pandemic and once during the pandemic. And I pull out for you some of the key points here. In 2019, on the question, do you know of colleagues who've experienced mental health issues? 75% answered yes to this question. When it became a bit darker, have you ever lost a work colleague to suicide? Nearly 20%, one in five, answered yes to this question. And when it became personal, have you ever considered suicide? Have you ever had suicidal ideation or self-harm? A similar number reported this, 1 in 5. So have you ever considered harming yourself or taking your own life? 21%. I actually had to stand up when I read this analysis and was working within the tools, because I didn't believe it. And some of the written responses were heart-wrenching. So this really set a course of change for my business, for EqualEngineers, for what we do as a consultancy in our training, to really center in on the experiences of the majority group, to see how they're experiencing everything that we're doing on DEI. Do they have some emotional, empathetic connection with it? We reran this survey, as I said, in 2021 and published the results last year. And unfortunately, this number had gone up. 1 in 4 engineers, 25%, had reported self-harm or suicidal ideation. So engineering has a mental health, STEM in general has a mental health emergency, and we need to be doing more about it. And I believe that the answer rests in what we're already doing with regards to physical safety and how we can better leverage our work on inclusion and belonging. So the report that we published really lobbied for a few things: creating parity of esteem between physical safety and mental health, diversity programs focusing on inclusion, and highlighting the toxic masculinity. Now, being a gay man, I came out when I was 17. And I have lived my life with that internalized shame that can come about when you've been in the closet for a period of time. And like an onion, peeling back the layers, you get a chance to show who you are depending on how safe you feel in a particular context. Now, this might not be your sexual orientation, it could be absolutely any element of your identity or your experiences that you're going through. And what I find when we focus in the workplace on inclusion and belonging, just being about being able to showcase things that you're going through, talk about your trials and tribulations, whether it be financial planning, gambling, addiction issues, if you're going through a nasty divorce, a separation, if you're having fertility problems, anything that's causing you to not be fully present in the moment, to be focused on your work, and that is then draining your energy elsewhere. That's what this is all about. Because if we've got workplaces where there's high risk, high potential risk scenarios taking place, events happening, we want people to be fully present and focused on the job. And I think this is where the heart of opportunity lies with communicating this to our workforce. And I would then advocate that we need to go back to the Bradley curve and thinking about extending it slightly. And I'm proposing we add a new level that looks at inclusive interdependence, where we're actually doing it as a collective, because collectively we create more safe teams. So that means you're looking out for others, and therefore that will be reciprocated. They're then looking out for you. And that's a subtlety that I think we miss in that stage 4 when we're looking at teams. I think we need to be motivating the people that may be not interested in getting involved in diversity initiatives to recognize that actually it is beneficial for you. Your safety will be better if you make this effort to get to understand the lived experiences of others. And I think we're missing that nuance in all our workplace strategies. So how do we expand that and take that learning into culture and pipeline? So if you think about an organization, this big circle represents what it means to work in an organization. And as a microscope, zooming in and out, actually at the core, you've got all the people that make up that organization itself. But there's a whole set of subcultures within there. And people go and experience these different locational, physical, or functional based settings. And what we want to create is cultures where these subgroups are porous. We understand the rules that are at play, but we recognize why they exist. But in reality, we all have biases. We have to make shortcuts in our decision making because we're on receive of so much information, which is why information management is important, that we do rely on biases to shortcut our decision making. And of course, in the fight for talent, the war on talent, there are a whole set of other cultures that people could go and work at. And that costs money. So when we look at the business case for diversity, creating inclusive workplace cultures, the displaced work impact can have an impact on your bottom line. And if we think about the talent pipeline itself, the largest group that are leaving the engineering industry are women in the age 30 to 39 bracket. And that might be due to a lack of inclusion. So when we think about succession planning and future leadership representation, that's not a good place to be in. And if you think about this pipeline being the entire industry, we need to be doing our best to get people in, to be bringing talent in, but then also retaining them. So we really position ourselves as a business in trying to help with that tightening the pipeline to stop the leaks, but also with the work that we do with universities to help expand down the chain. And very much the messaging with which I'm communicating with you today in terms of reconsidering, recalibrating our workplace culture work to center in on this idea. It's how we're making inroads to helping organizations get more people proactively supporting their diversity efforts. So this is the expanded pipeline where we go from nursery school through to retirement. With our Pathways program, we're helping facilitate networking, connecting experienced engineers with future engineers, reciprocally pairing based on diversity dimension where we can. And that's really helping create this great fusion of connectivity and learning and relationship building between different generations. And I think this is the way forward for any sector. And this is just a sort of idea of us placing ourselves at the middle and then being a connector between different places. We've in the last year, we've been doing more work with universities. Given that this focuses on diversity of thought, I wanted to highlight one of the projects that we've been doing with Plymouth University. This was funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering. It's been looking at embedding systemic inclusion for neurodiverse and disabled engineering students. I ran some focus groups with the students. We took some of the learnings from this and then we shared it back to the 100 and odd academics in one of their away days. And it was very, very illuminating. A lot of stuff came up with some immediate actions that could be taken to help improve the culture, and also some of the lessons learned from the good things during the pandemic in terms of their shift in training materials that could be reintroduced by some of the lecturers. So it facilitated this learning experience from an identity group that you cannot necessarily see from the surface looking at people. So putting my visiting professor hat on and thinking about the work that we're doing with students and engineering in general, we want to strive to create more inclusively conscious engineers. And I use the word engineer interchangeably with professionals working in STEM industries. This is the slide that resonates the most when I work with engineering leaders. It's this fear of walking on eggshells for saying the wrong thing that people do not often engage with the conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's quite often white male leaders that have made it to the top of an organization. So for fear of the saying the wrong thing, they don't engage in anything related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the whole point is that everyone has got a diversity story. And when you think about diversity of thought and experience, it's just that some of us have to dig a bit deeper into finding what that difference was, and recognize, can we bring that up? Can we use that as an emotional anchor point from our past to then build empathy for groups that are maybe going through some sort of exclusionary experience at a superficial level? I think when you can help people who don't necessarily identify with any of the 10 protected characteristics under the Equality Act and therefore feel left out, that's where we're not engaging people. But as I said earlier, when you start framing it that it is very relevant about experiences as well, like fertility issues and things that actually affect a lot of people but that are taboo and don't often get spoken about, people then start to feel connected to it. And so my hypothesis, coming back to safety management, is if you look at the ALARP triangle, where we look at trying to look for low frequency but high likelihood rates that are occurring, sort of scenarios, situations. If we can try and get more people to make connections with sharing their experiences and therefore being a role model for others to air it out, I think will help reduce that high incident rate of suicidal ideation and self-harm. We'll start making it safe, psychologically safe, to be open, independent of the group's composition, about some of these subjects. And we're just not there yet when we have a majority male workforce. Men do not be vulnerable, do not open up in front of one another. And that is because of, the historical expectations of men and what it means to provide, etc. So there's a whole lot of psychology that we need to sort of work to challenge and to underpin, and recognize that this force, this underlying force and dynamic is having an impact in management, in decisions that are made, in how we promote people, in whether people put themselves forward or stand up and speak out. So being that swan where you have to be calm on the surface, but underneath you might be struggling, you need to proactively learn about other experiences that you will never be, identities that you will never be. You have to make the effort to learn about those lived experiences so that you can have secondary learned experience. I will never be a Black woman. I will never be a Black woman. So by me learning about the experiences of how Black women experience STEM, I then have a more valid reference point by listening to stories, watching TED Talks, reading blogs, to then know how it might then show up in a workplace context where I have leadership responsibility, etc., etc. So it's incumbent on all of us to learn about others' experiences. And the more that people open up about their experiences, the more diverse the tapestry of opportunity for us to learn from. That applies to men as well. And this is the whole point about allyship. Very often we think about allyship about putting a rainbow lanyard on your neck for June, for Pride Month, or, celebrating some role models for Black History Month. It is about that, but it's also about much more than that. And it's about moving from a position of apathy where you have absolutely no understanding of the issues that might affect a particular group because you feel like you're walking on eggshells and for fear of offending, you don't say anything, all the way through to being consciously aware, then becoming an active ally, but then becoming an advocate, feeling like you can, speak from a frame of reference that is accurate for a particular group. You'll never speak on behalf of a group, but you certainly have deeper understanding. And of course, this is more of a circle rather than a continuum because we're always learning. And we need to be comfortable in pushing ourselves into that growth zone, that discomfort zone. So my ambition for safety and diversity, just to wrap up, is that with the mentoring piece that we're doing, every STEM student has access to a mentor. I think by pairing up the current generation, the current leaders and those delivering infrastructure projects and information management with the future generation, we'll get a real sweet spot of bias challenging when we've got 5 generations working in the workforce at once. And I'd like to see STEM students supporting industry more with innovative projects during their study and getting more people actually into jobs in STEM. There's still a high drop-off rate from those studying science STEM now, then transitioning into either academia or staying in academia or industry. And we need for psychological safety to become an absolute core focus of STEM. So we're working to our strategy as a business to help achieve that. We've got various work streams in different regions with different stakeholder types. Very interested for anyone on the call interested to get involved. Please get in touch. My ultimate ambition is for mental health to be seen as an equivalent to physical safety. Psychological safety being equivalent to physical safety. And I think we need to look at our safety reporting mechanisms and think about how can we start bringing some of these things in. What some of the data points that we could track to actually see how we're performing. Right now, I think we just have a lot of lagging indicators, which is all bunched into a number of work days lost per year due to workplace absences, stress, etc., like that. That will be masking and hiding a whole bunch of data that's under the surface because people don't feel safe, don't feel like they can trust their organizations to be open about whatever the root causes are that are driving those rates. So I think there's a lot we could do as a country, to be honest, to help shape that focus. Work we're doing with students is to think about embedding equality impact assessments within their studies. And some of this thought process is playing part of that. So again, if you're interested in getting involved or finding out more, please get in touch. It's very, very early days on this stuff, but it's looking at how we diversify the STEM curriculum as it is now, getting them to think about the projects that they're doing, but also the composition of the teams that they are working in, and also the role models from industry that they see coming in to talk to them about their STEM work, and also their personal stories. The little bit that we're trying to do to help that, I'm taking my experience from setting up a cross-sector network group on LGBTQ inter-engineering and bringing it into EqualEngineers, and we're now starting to set up other cross-sector network groups. We recently launched a neurodiversity network, and we also recently launched a menopause network. And for 2024, we're planning to launch an ethnicity network, a disability network, and I've got a personal interest in this work that I've been doing on masculinity. I'd like to also launch a men's network to help coalesce a group to focus on these issues. I am nearly at time, and I'm sped through what I usually take a lot longer to deliver. I'm actually realized that I needed to bring everything together because I just had a lot to say on this topic. Very, very passionate about it. Dame Judith Hackett has been a strong advocate for the work that I've been doing in this area, and she's kindly offered the forward, written a forward for my new book that will be coming out in February next year. It's called, the title of this presentation, Engineering Inclusive Cultures, Masculinity, Mental Health, and a New Model for Safety in STEM. And in it, we present some ways in which we think that as a sector, we could come together to start making this common practice. So there's some design methodologies in there, and we're now looking for partners that might be interested to work with us on recasting these in a new way in your organizations. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. I'm really looking forward to the panel. We've got an excellent group. Thank you so much for the invitation. I hope you've taken something away from it. Please get in touch on my email if you have any questions, or connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Thanks.